Hello, everybody. Welcome to this Cook County Racial Equity event on public transit. The Active Transportation Alliance is thrilled to co-host this event with Cook County. And we're grateful for the support from the Chicago Community Trust and all of the people who are here today to share their thoughts and experiences. It's an honor to work with leaders like President Preckwinkle, who has made public transit a priority throughout her time at Cook County. And she really understands why it's so important to our region. Like many of you and many organizations at Active Transportation Alliance, we've been evaluating how our mission applies during the pandemic and how we can be most effective at responding to it. From the start, we've focused on making sure transit is safe and reliable for everyone who needs it, especially essential workers who don't have the privilege of working from home. We know Black and Brown residents across the county are less likely to be able to work from home and more likely to rely on transit to get around. Supporting transit means supporting these residents, our residents. And to do so, we need to secure funding reforms from the federal, state, and local governments. Ridership can't be our sole metric of success. Let's focus on providing access to jobs and opportunity for our highest need residents and to avoid treating public transit the same as we would a private business. I'm really looking forward to hearing directly today from our elected officials during the roundtable about how we can continue to work together to support public transit during the pandemic and as we emerge from it. And we're particularly grateful to see one of our partners here today and the leadership of Andrea Reed from the Roseland Chamber of Commerce and other members of the Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric who have been advancing the Cook County Fair Transit pilot, which is what we need to be doing during a pandemic. And it's something that happens only because community leaders really step up and help make it happen. So thank you. Thank you all for being here, and I look forward to learning more today.
Good morning, everyone. How are you? I hope you're enjoying the day so far. My name is Jackie Grimshaw, and I'm Vice President for Governmental Affairs at the Center for Neighborhood Technology. And I just want to give you kind of a rundown of what we're going to be doing this morning. We're going to have two presentations, one by Audrey Winnick, who is the Director of Transportation at the Metropolitan Planning Council, and then another presentation by Andrea Reed, who is the co-chair for the Coalition of Modern Metro Electric that Amy just referenced, but she's also the Executive Director of the Roseland Chamber of Commerce. And after they do their presentations, we'll see a video from Senator Bill Cunningham, who could not be with us today, but wanted to share his thoughts about equity and transportation. And then we'll have a panel discussion and a roundtable. And during that discussion, you are free to put any questions that you want to present, that you want either the presenters or the panelists to answer in the comment section or the chat section. And when we get to Q&A, we will take up those questions. So to get us started, Audrey Winnick from the Metropolitan Planning Council, the Transportation Director, will be our first presenter.
Good morning. Thank you, Jackie, and thank you to Cook County for inviting me to be here to talk about transportation equity in Cook County. First, it's really important to understand where people live and where they're going for work as we talk about these issues. And we want to focus on those in this region who have the greatest needs. So I'm showing you a map here that talks about, it shows economically disconnected areas in our region, which are the dark blue areas, which are defined as places with concentrations of both low-income households and minority or limited English proficiency populations. Approximately 1/3 of the region's population lives in economically disconnected areas. And what's important to note is how those locations relate to the gold areas, which is where the job concentrations are in our region. You can see that there is a well-known jobs housing mismatch. Many people live far away from those concentrations of jobs. And what does that mean for transportation? In the greater Chicago region, where Black residents are the largest racial groups, they experience the longest commute times. So in this map, you can see that of the 100 census tracts shown in red with the longest commutes, 44 minutes each way, 95 of them are majority Black or Latinx. And the median income is $31,000 for the households. And the majority of shortest commute tracts, over 50 of the 100, are majority white, and the median income is over $75,000 in those locations. So you can really see a snapshot of the inequities we're dealing with. I also want to show at a local level what this can look like. So if we look at this map on the left side, you can see people that are originating in Woodlawn and where they're going for work. You can see that there's a widely dispersed set of locations that's shown in orange and yellow and red throughout the region that they're traveling to. But on the right side, we see if someone lives in Ravenswood, they're going to a much more concentrated set of work locations that is much more aligned with transit. So and so this can show what the experience is like and how it can vary greatly depending on the context people are living in and their skills match. As we continue through the presentation, it's important to understand how we did travel to work. So this is information from the pre-COVID era, and COVID has changed things a lot. But let's understand kind of where we started and where we're working from. A lot of people in this region, the majority in the 7-county region, do drive to work or did drive to work. We also had we do have a significant share of people in the region taking transit, but at the regional level, there was a lot less use of sustainable modes of transportation, which is partly related to where jobs are located. If we look at the city of Chicago, it's important to see that for large cities, Chicago actually is a little bit on the lower end, given its size, in terms of sustainable modes of transportation and affordable modes of transportation. So transit, shown in blue, walking in orange, and biking in green comprise just over 1/3 of trips to the city of Chicago, despite our very significant transit infrastructure. The next thing I want to focus on is to understand the number of households in this region that do not have cars. And that is a large share in the city of Chicago. 27% of households do not have cars, and at the regional level, 13%. So this map on the left side shows where people do not have cars in their households. And you can see on the south side of that map of Cook County that there are really large swaths of districts where there are 10, 20, and 30% or up to 40% of households do not have cars, and therefore we need to be providing alternative modes of transportation. And then on the right side, the map shows where households are burdened with long commutes. And you can see that there are a lot of areas also on the south and west sides of the Cook County region that are experiencing commutes over 60 minutes, and that's a large time burden that people are experiencing. So what has happened during COVID? This is a map that shows ridership on our CTA rail system during the lockdown in April. And the dark blue dots show where people decrease their ridership significantly, and the lighter blue dots show where people are continuing to ride. And so you can see very clearly that on the south and west sides of Chicago, people were and are still riding transit in large numbers, and still need to have robust transit service. And these trends are also the same on our bus service. This shows how we need to prioritize services in areas where we have many essential workers. Another important facet of this conversation is understanding the true cost of transportation. As we're talking about equity, it's very important to support people having options other than driving a car, because it is a very high household expense. It can consume a large share of household incomes. And I'll show you this graph, which has national data, and it shows the 5 quintiles of income. And what it shows is the red line is the proportion, the percentage of household income that's spent on transportation. And so on the left side, those are households with low income, and you can see the red line is very, very high. The lowest earning 20% of the population spends an average of almost 30% on transportation costs. And then the next category spends 22% of their household income on transportation costs. So this just goes to show we've got to show other options. And then I will finish up talking a little bit about the land use implications of all this. We've talked about the cost of owning a car and the challenges of reaching jobs by transit. And land use policies are part of the solution. We need to have more housing and jobs near transit. The recent history in Chicago is that transit-oriented development has largely occurred on the north side and downtown, as shown on the map. And we need to proactively cultivate development where it's needed on the south and west sides. So how do we do that? Transit-oriented development efforts have been going on in terms of a pilot effort with the Elevated Collaborative, which is developing policies and pilots to show how to do this so that we can learn how to develop jobs and affordable housing at all of our transit stations throughout the region. It's also something that I'll note is that the City of Chicago just released an equitable transit-oriented development policy plan this week that'll list a number of policies that we can all learn from, and it's open for public comment. So we can implement these policies and not only strengthen transit and transit operations and make transit accessible and affordable to people, but also make sure we're building around transit for the long-term future of our region. And I will stop there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Audrey, very much for that presentation. And hopefully the panel is thinking about that, because I'm going to have some questions as we get into our roundtable. But right now, let's hear from Andrea Reed, who is a co-chair for the Coalition of Modern Metro Electric and the executive director of the Roseland Chamber of Commerce.
Good morning. My name, again, is Andrea Reed. I am co-chair of the Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric and executive director of the Greater Roseland Chamber of Commerce. The Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric is a grassroots organization comprised of Chicago residents and organizations who want improved service and connections on the South Side. Linda Thisted and I, as co-chairs, have worked tirelessly advocating for equitable, affordable, and seamless transportation on the South Side of Chicago. The question that may be looming in the minds of many is, why are we advocating for equitable transportation? Well, the reality is communities like Roseland are in a transit desert. Lack of adequate transportation negatively impacts the quality of life in communities experiencing this gross inequity. I personally became interested in this topic when I attended a cost of segregation conference conducted by the Metropolitan Planning Council. It was stunning to learn that transportation and other viable resources had been deliberately cut off in certain areas in our city. In my role as executive director of the Greater Roseland Chamber of Commerce, I am a frontline witness to the effects of decades of disinvestment in our community. I am deeply involved in how we can promote economic growth and stability throughout our community and within our business corridors. Transportation is a major driver and is essential in helping to improve the quality of life in any community. I hope we can all agree that transportation is very important no matter where you live. I have a question for those of us who have access to various modes of transportation. Can you imagine what you would do if you had limited access or limited choices of transportation? Have you ever thought about how the lack of adequate transportation could impact your quality of life? Transportation can impact the community in the following ways. Employers are less likely to hire individuals who don't have adequate or dependable transportation. With ample transportation, individuals can get to jobs that provide income, which can help stabilize families, allowing them to make plans for the future. The fact that communities like Roseland are in transportation deserts in this modern time is simply unacceptable. As we have the red line, and we are very proud of the recent improvements that have been made. The red line, 95th Street, at the red line 95th Street station. Great progress has been made, and plans for extension of the red line to 130th Street are underway. Transit-dependent residents still have to depend on long bus rides on the far south side to get them to and from 95th Street. The Metro Electric is one of the major and strongest remaining underutilized assets that can generate economic development in our community, and the infrastructure is in place for the Metro to run as a rapid transit line. But let's keep in mind, the initiative is not to compete with the red line. We need both. Post-COVID, people will need access to transportation more than ever before. Chicago is a major metropolitan city. We are the city that works. Mayor Lightfoot has put forward the city's Invest Southwest initiative. And we believe that Cook County pilot project is an excellent fit. The Metro Electric can serve as an additional mode of transportation for transit-dependent residents in the South Cook region. In order to implement this project, the Metro Electric will need to lower its fares to match the CTA. Riders will need the opportunity to transfer to a bus without having to pay a second full fare, have safer stations, and more frequent trains. The Cook County Pilot Project is proposing to fund this initiative for a 3-year period. This pilot project will also include the Rock Island line for those communities that live west of the Dan Ryan. Now more than ever before, it is necessary to ignite the pilot to move forward by changing and improving transportation in areas that have suffered for far too long. Making transportation equitable, seamless, and affordable is a win for the city of Chicago. Igniting the pilot will help move these overlooked communities progressively forward to a brighter future and will change the trajectory of communities that have suffered access to equitable and affordable transportation. On behalf of the Coalition for a Modern Metro Electric, we would like to thank our legislators, State Rep Marcus Evans Jr., for listening and responding to the call by sponsoring the bill that put teeth to our advocacy, as well as Senator Bill Cunningham, who co-sponsored the bill, State Rep Nick Smith, and all the other sponsors who have signed on. Thank you, President Toni Preckwinkle, for your commitment to advancing policies and projects that advance racial equity and social justice. Also, thank you for your steadfast commitment to this project. Now, guys, let's ignite the pilot. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. And make sure you distribute those buttons widely. So now we're going to hear a pre-recorded video testimony from Senator Bill Cunningham, who Andrea just mentioned. We are going to do that, right? Yes.
Hi, I'm Senator Bill Cunningham, and I want to start by thanking President Preckwinkle for the work she's done to address inequities we have right now in mass transit in the Chicago area. These are very important issues that we need to spend more time both here in Springfield and in the Chicago area discussing. I like to try to illustrate this problem with sort of an anecdote or an example of what people in my district on the south side of Chicago experience when they want to take mass transit downtown. Just hypothetically speaking, let's say you're a single mother and you live at 89th and Ashland, which is on the north end of my district, and you want to take mass transit, take a train downtown and be downtown in a half hour or 40 minutes. You can walk to one of two metro stations, either the 91st Street or Brainerd Station, and take the Rock Island Metro downtown. That will cost you $5.50. Now, on the other hand, let's say you're an executive working downtown and you live in Wilmette on Sheridan Road, and you would like to take mass transit, take a train downtown and be downtown in a half hour, 40 minutes, you can walk a few blocks to the Linden CTA station and hop on a train there and spend $2.50. So the single mother probably working a service-oriented job downtown is paying twice as much to go to the same place and travel approximately the same distance. That's a reality that we have to deal with. That is not fair, I think, by anyone's judgment. I think everyone would acknowledge that it's unfair, and we need to address it. And I think the pilot program that President Preckwinkle has talked about, where the county partners with the CTA and the RTA to address this by evening out fares, making them the same for Chicago residents on the Metra train lines as they are on the CTA train lines, is a great first step in addressing that. And I support her efforts and am willing to do anything that needs to be done in Springfield to help with this program. Thank you.
Now we will start our panel discussion, and I'm going to ask each of the panelists to spend 1 to 2 minutes introducing themselves and describing why transit equity in the region is important to them. And after that, we will have a discussion. So President Preckwinkle, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much, Jackie. So first of all, I should say that I'm a person who rides public transit, even in my present position, although I probably shouldn't confess that because my detail will hear about this. But, you know, I love buses and trains. And whenever I go out of town, I try to be sure to take public transit as well, to try to compare it to the resources that are available here. But, you know, one of the troubling things about our present moment is that COVID-19 has exposed the tremendous racial inequities that exist in a variety of arenas. And not the least of these is what's happened economically to our communities. You know, many of our residents in Cook County have had the opportunity to work remotely, but they're mostly white collar residents and they're mostly white people. Our essential workers, disproportionately Black and brown, have been required to show up for work. So we're talking about, you know, the folks who work in our grocery stores, the people who work in our pharmacies, not to mention our first responses, our nurses like my daughter, disproportionately Black and brown folks. And they, of course, are disproportionately reliant on public transit. So the importance of public transit is always part of our sort of economic undergirding. And it's even more important in these times, in this pandemic, because our essential workers are reliant on public transit. And public transit is a critical public resource. And we need to support it in every way we can, which is part of the reason that Cook County has invested in our Fair Transit initiative to try to be sure that the parts of the county that are now least served by public transit, who have the longest commute times and the least resources, have additional support in terms of lower fares and increased service on the Metro Electric line and on the Rock Island line, which serve the south and southeast sides of Chicago and the south suburbs. So I'm very grateful to all of the panelists who've been willing to be with us this morning, and I look forward to our conversation.
Up next, Representative Marcus Evans.
All right, thank you, and thank you to the leadership of President Preckwinkle for wanting to tackle this very, very important issue. I think that you know, President Preckwinkle, and we're all going to get into the equity conversation when it comes to low-income folks. But I think what I would add is you think about just the enjoyment of life, you know, coming home and enjoy your family. I think the COVID time has reminded us how we love our families. And we know we're going to get through COVID, but thinking about how life will be when we get back to our normal operations, you know, people want to get home and spend time with their family. And the difference between being on the expressway for an hour to get to the south suburbs, or maybe being on the train for 20 minutes, you couple all that time, that's much more time of enjoyment with families coming together. We talk about crime. It's really about people coming together and having things to do and being able to move around. President Preckwinkle shepherds over a very large county. And at times, you know, surveying the county and getting around this county is very difficult, particularly if you're low income, for whether it's for enjoyment or employment. So that's what life is. And I really want to then thank the president for pushing this initiative through. And I was proud to join with Senator Cunningham to file legislation to kind of make this possible. I live in walking distance of the electric line on the southeast side of Chicago in Avalon Park community, and that line should be more utilized. And I think affordability will help that. And again, we'll help families, and we'll just overall improve the state of existence with better transportation. It's a priority, and we're chipping away at that.
All right, thank you, Representative. And now Senator Roundville.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, Jackie. As was mentioned, my name is Ron Villi-Vullum. I'm the state senator for the 8th District, which includes 21 neighborhoods in the city of Chicago, from Albany Park to West Rogers Park, and the northern suburbs of Lincolnwood, Skokie, Niles, Morton Grove, Glenview, and unincorporated Des Plaines. First and foremost, want to thank Cook County Board President Toni Preckwinkle and her staff for putting this together. I'm excited. I am the chair of the Transportation Committee in the Illinois State Senate, and I'm excited because we are having a very serious conversation, a very comprehensive conversation about racial equity and the disinvestment of dollars in communities of color, and criminal justice reform and so forth. And all parts of what I just mentioned are incredibly important. And I'm just excited because transparency and transportation needs to be a part of that conversation, needs to be a part of the equity conversation. And so I look forward to having this conversation. For me, having, since I took over as chair of transportation earlier this year, having a data-driven, transparent, and equitable process in how we allocate funding for our transportation and infrastructure projects across the state has been my North Star, has been the guiding principle of how I'm approaching this committee, whether it's through the multi-year plan at IDOT, the tollway, you name it. I'm trying to use that guiding principle because, quite honestly, it's the right thing to do. And I believe that everyone should have a reasonable commute to work, access to healthcare, quality education, affordable housing, the public safety that we all deserve. And you know, that's a conversation in itself about what public safety means and what people feel safe in. But the reality is everyone deserves those things. Everyone deserves those things. And we cannot lose sight of that. And so I am honored to be a part of this conversation. I strongly believe we're one city, one county, one state. And I tell folks in my district all the time that I believe we need to do better for the south and west sides of Chicago, for other parts of the county that are facing these inequities, because it's the right thing to do, and because a rising tide lifts all ships. And I truly believe that. And so with that, thank you again for having me. I look forward to having this conversation and the work that takes place after it.
Thank you, Senator. Now, Commissioner Donna Miller.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And thank you, Madam President, for putting together this roundtable and for having the foresight last year to start Racial Equity Week in Cook County to draw attention to and work towards solutions to advancing racial equity throughout Cook County. I also want to thank Audrey Winnick and Andrea Reed for your presentation. And Andrea, you'll be interested to know that my most valuable assets ride Metro Electric, or did ride Metro Electric every day on their way to high school, my two boys. So we are participants, and I would take the Metro Electric line down to the county when we were before COVID. But this is such an important topic, especially in the south suburbs, where I represent 36 municipalities in the south and southwest suburbs. And as was mentioned by Audrey's presentation, you know, we have some of the longest commute times in the county, whether it's for employment or healthcare or even grocery shopping. So I'm grateful for the work that the county has done in supporting the transportation infrastructure in my district and in the Southland as a whole throughout all of Cook County. We also have other programs like Invest in Cook, and I just want to give a shout out to our great superintendent of highways and transportation, John Yonan, who's done a great job at administering this program and has invested millions of dollars in transportation infrastructure throughout the southern suburbs. Another important transportation program that Madam President addressed was the equity and the fair transit for South Cook County, the pilot program, to implement changes for the fare policy and modest service improvements and improved coordination between METRA, CTA, and PACE. But when we also talk about improving racial equity, it also relates to transportation. We have to talk about the leadership that's in place. And you have to be at the table if you want to bring about these changes and improvement. So having minorities in leadership positions is paramount to improving equity across the board. I'm so happy to see our state representatives and state senators who are leaders in this area. But now is also a time for transformational change, including in transportation, and we need innovative leaders that are representative of the communities to advance these equitable solutions. So that's why, as an African-American elected official, it was important to me as a member of the Cook County Board and Suburban Caucus on the Regional Transportation appointment that I was able to bring forth the nomination of Ms. Jamie Gatling to the RTA Board of Directors, which oversees financial oversight and funding and the regional transit planning for one of the 3 transit agencies, so CTA, Metro, and PACE. Along with the appointment of Ms. Mary Beth Canty, it also marks the first time that 2 Black women will serve on the RTA board. And both of these appointments were unanimously approved just a few months ago. Their terms started July 1st. So we have a lot of work to do. I'm glad to see the partnership of all of us working together. And with that, I'll turn it back over and look forward to the discussion.
Okay, and now Mayor Rick Reinbold from Richmond Park.
Good morning. My name is Rick Reinbold. As stated, I'm the mayor of Richmond Park. I also had the opportunity and pleasure of serving on South Suburban Mayors and Managers Transportation Committee, and I also enjoy serving on CMAP's Board of Directors. When we have a conversation like this about equity and affordability, it just falls in line from my perspective with best practices in planning in general, but it also speaks to the need for investment in our infrastructure to ensure that there's, number one, the availability, but the funding to support equitable transportation initiatives. Many times in regions where our lower income residents or minority and disadvantaged residents are drawn to a region or a specific area because there's very affordable housing. If we don't have adequate and affordable local public infrastructure in terms of transportation to support those individuals, the advantage to lower housing costs for those individuals is blunted by the fact that they have to pay a very high percentage, a disproportionate percentage of their income for transportation. I look forward to this conversation. I think it's an opportunity to develop some good strategies and some positive and informative policies around transportation and the need to make that investment. And I think a lot of this comes down to making sure that we dedicate the funds to make sure that there is affordable, and it's not disproportionate or unequal cost for transportation. Madam President, again, thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to our discussion. Thank you.
Terrific. You've heard from all of our panelists. You know who they are, and I like to get started by asking them all to answer the same question, and that is, what do you view as the role of public transit, especially in this time of COVID? We've heard from both Audrey as well as President Preckwinkle about the need for essential workers to have transit. But what are you hearing from your constituents as it relates to this COVID era that we're in? Let's start with President Preckwinkle. You're muted, President.
Thank you. So I would be remiss if I didn't remind us that this is Racial Equity Week in Cook County, and this is one of our program initiatives as part of Racial Equity Week. So, you know, I think that when we talk about public transit, we're talking about equity, Several of our panelists have spoken to that issue. And we need to be looking at transit not just as a sort of the economic foundation in our economy, but you look at it as a vehicle for addressing some of the equity issues that we're challenged by. And I spoke earlier about our Fair Transit Initiative, which will begin early next year. And we will be subsidizing Metra and PACE and CTA if they choose to be part of this initiative, and offering lower fares on the Metro Electric and Rock Island lines that serve, again, the south and southeast side of Chicago and the south suburbs, lower fares and increased service, because we know that this is the part of the county, that is the south side of Chicago and the south suburbs, that have the most challenged access to public transit. They are not as well served by public transit as other parts of the county. And we know that particularly in our Black and brown neighborhoods, people have less access to transit and longer commutes. So we're trying to do what we can with county resources. Again, we're putting money on the table to make this work. We're trying to do the best we can to give those who are least served by public transit better access at lower cost. And I think that's critical. This Fair Transit Initiative will begin early next year. And I look forward to working with all of our elected officials to try to make it a success. And I want to thank, in particular, our state leaders, Representative Marcus Evans and Senator Villa for their support in their respective capacities as head of the transportation committees for the House and the Senate, for their support and assistance.
Mayor Reinbold, you're as our local elected official on this panel. What are you hearing from your constituents as it relates to transportation in this COVID era?
In Richmond Park, we've unfortunately had a history of being an underserved community when it comes to transportation. Just as an example, we have virtually no PACE bus service in the village of Richmond Park. We're fortunate that we do have our metro station in the village, but we hear from our constituents that it's a constant challenge to have adequate access. For many of our residents, unfortunately, the alternative for those that don't have transportation is Uber. That's not a viable solution to the day-to-day needs of the residents in our community. So it is a challenge for many of our residents. I think we have to make the decision and the commitment to fund these programs that give our residents reasonable access to transportation and those benefits.
Well, Commissioner Miller, I'd like for you to answer the same question as a representative of the far south suburbs. What are you hearing from your constituents?
Yes, as you know, many of the south suburbs are in the same situation as Mayor Reinbold just acknowledged, and that limits our connectivity as well as where people can go, even from one suburb to another suburb, let alone go from the suburbs to the city of Chicago without transportation. And I'll just even say from my own personal knowledge, having to take my kids to the Metra every day and pick them up because there's no bus that would take them from the Metra to where we live. So it's great to have the safety and comfort of living in, suburban areas where my area is considered a bedroom community, and safe to know that, we feel that safety here, but that also insulates us from having that type of transportation, whether it be for school, whether it be for work, or even for healthcare. I have heard from a couple of constituents about the ability to be able to get to hospital services, or especially in the era of COVID, if they don't have transportation. I think fortunately, we also have services through Cook County Hospital where, there's a van that can come pick up people, but that's not public transportation. And again, it's the knowledge gap of people being able to know that those services are available to them.
Okay, and Representative Evans, again, representing, part of the far south side of Chicago. What are you hearing from your constituents?
Again, some of the same things. I represent the south side and the immediate suburban areas, Burnham, Cal City, Lansing, Lewis, Sauk Village. And unlike the more western portion, we have the electric line. The electric line starts to go west. So if you're in Calumet City, you're in Linwood, it gets very difficult just to navigate to get around, maybe to a restaurant, to go shopping, again, to get back and forth from school. It's really about allowing the mobility for low-income folks. If you do research across the country, across the world, quite frankly, an issue that low-income people have, and that's why I thank the president for this Equity Week, is low-income people want to move around. They want to enjoy life. They want to work. They want to do all the things that individuals with high-income brackets get the opportunity to enjoy. And transportation allows this, allows for educational opportunities, allows for a teenager or a young person to just explore a different part of the county, different part of the city, to learn about new opportunities and access them swiftly. And again, to allow families to have that family time. I think COVID has reminded us about family time. But again, when we get back to the normal movements, we still want people to have that time to go to a basketball game after work, to enjoy time in the park, to enjoy a new community. If I want to get to the north suburban community for a restaurant, if someone wants to come to the south suburbs to enjoy a business, the commute now is ridiculous. It's almost easier to drive, a couple of hours or so to another state. And that's the problem. The county is not connected. So I think that, this transit equity conversation is so critical. And I think a lot of people don't even know how critical it is because it's been bad for so long. So we just accept it. This is the way it is. And I think President Preckwinkle is saying, there's a better way to do this. We don't have to just say this is the way Chicago is, this is the way the county is. We can take steps to make transit better, and then people will see a new thing. When you go to DC, when you're in Boston, when you're in some of these other cities, it's very easy to get around on public transit. But Chicago, we have issues. Some of our stops need to be modified and improved. We just need to change the way in which people see transit, and this is a huge step. And that's why I'm so excited to be a part of this with my local leader, President Preckwinkle.
And the last person to answer this question, Senator Rahm, I want you to think about it from the constituents that you represent on the north side and the north suburbs, but also as a state senator, all of us are your constituents. So from that point of view, what are you hearing also from your role as chair of the Transportation Committee?
Apologies, had to unmute myself. I hear the 2-year-old came in the background, so you might hear him. He might even come in. We'll see. But I'm glad you mentioned that. First and foremost, I think we need to make sure people understand there's perceptions that exist about different communities. And look, I have a district that's 25% Asian American, 13% Hispanic, 5% African American. So certainly it's not the same as Representative Evans's district. However, the population that I represent still has a sizable low-income population. So first off, I want to make sure, people, and even my district, some folks think, well, that's not an issue in our district. Well, I'll be the first one to tell them, yes, it is. And so this is an issue for a lot of communities in our city, our county, our state. And so we got to break that perception first and foremost. Secondly, as you mentioned, I look at the state as the chairman of transportation. I look at the state, and there's two items that I hear both from my constituents and from across the state, which is one, and this goes back to what we're living in, is that the pandemic has really exposed some of the glaring issues that we've had. Look, you can talk about it from a healthcare perspective. You can talk about it from a unemployment insurance perspective. There's a number of different ways you can look at it and say, yeah, we need to do better. Or we need to be more prepared in these situations. Look, a pandemic happened last time it happened. It was 100 years ago. So we're going with the flow. We're trying to make it all work. But the pandemic has shown some glaring concerns about what doesn't exist. And one of those is transit. Look, we have people that now have to go to their local food pantry. We have people that now, to whatever extent they're open, have to go to their local government office to access services. And it's unfortunate, but it's true. And now they may not have the same transit opportunities or situation that they did before. And so people are having to access resources and having to use transit in a way they haven't before. And now a lot of them are realizing, and I get calls about this, man, this is hard. You know, this is an hour-long commute just to go to my local DMV. And so we it's certainly exposed that front, number one. Number two, you know, we have people that reach out to us about the concerns in terms of being exposed to the pandemic, the COVID-19, right? So if you take a public transit, people are concerned about the sanitation of those vehicles and those facilities. And so, you know, which is why I wrote a letter along with 17 of my colleagues to all some 100 transit agencies in the state of Illinois, asking them, what are your procedures, you know, for temperature checks, for contact tracing, for testing, for sanitation, and so forth. And thankfully, a lot of them wrote back and explained what they were doing. And we're able to use that information to get the word out to say, hey, you don't have to be concerned. You know, the public agencies, transit agencies are taking steps to ensure your safety. And so, you know, but that goes back to what President Preckwinkle earlier said, which is we got to think about who we're talking about. And these are the workers that are sanitizing these vehicles and facilities are mostly African-American, Latino workers. People that are using the public transit more are African-American and Latino. And so we need to make sure that we're doing right by everyone. And that starts with recognizing the inequities that exist and then addressing them. And I'm so thankful that the president is having this conversation and moving it forward.
Now, I want to stay with you for one additional second, Senator. As you know, I co-chair the Transportation Equity Network. We have testified in front of your committee, but I'd like to have you think about what you learned from us and how do you think that that's impacting your vision for transit equity?
Well, what I've learned is a great deal, and it's impacting quite a bit. And I say that because I can have the guiding principle of transparency, data-driven, and equitable processes for transportation and infrastructure funding, but I need the data and information to follow through on that. And that's what you all have provided. Look, we're talking about transit, and we all recognize the issue. And I think, you know, we can talk about it anecdotally. You know, we hear from people every day. But the data that you all provide, I mean, look, 95 out of the 100 longest commutes in the Chicago area region are from Black and Latino communities. That's wrong, plain and simple. I would not have that data, though, unless it was for groups like yourself coming before our committee and testifying to that effect and providing those reports. And so, again, for me, it goes back to we got to recognize what the issue is and then address it. But part of recognizing it is having the data and information. So it's been tremendously helpful. And look, when we have that data, it's hard to argue. It's hard to argue against. That's a problem. 95 out of the top 100, that's a problem. And so that's, I think, incredibly important. And that's what I've used in the two virtual hearings that we've had with the IDOT and tollway focus, you know, using that information now to create the legislative measures in addition to what President Preckwinkle and Representative Evans are doing to address these issues.
Thank you. So President Preckwinkle, you know, we heard Andrea talk about the fair transit. You mentioned it earlier, but I'd like to ask you, how does that fair transit pilot project fit into the public transit issue and racial equity?
Well, first of all, let me reiterate that we're going to begin our Fair Transit Initiative at the beginning of the coming year in 2021. And we hope that it has a tremendous impact on equity because we're trying to support those lines, those parts of the metro system that serve the communities that are most underserved. Again, south side, southeast side of Chicago, south suburbs. We're trying to take a holistic approach to improving access. The project got delayed a little bit as a result of COVID-19, as a number of things got delayed. But as I said, we're going to begin this project at the beginning of next year, and we'll have an announcement about it soon. You know, we're working with Metro and Pace. You know, what we really need in our region is a universal fare card. I mean, we need to be able, you should be able to transfer from Metra to PACE and back and forth. You should be able to transfer to CTA and Metra and PACE. We're not there, despite, I think, a legislative mandate that that's what we do. We're not there. But we're trying to create connections between Metra and PACE, and if CTA will work with us, with the CTA as well, that will enable people to transfer at a pretty modest cost between the two service lines, Metra and PACE. So in the absence of a universal fare card, which is what we need, interchangeable transfers, we're going to try to do the best we can with our Fair Transit initiative. But as I said, COVID-19 has illuminated in ways that people might not have anticipated the racial inequities that plague our country and our county and our city. And one of those is who still has to work in the time of a pandemic, and who rides public transit and is transit dependent, and what that means in terms of their health and well-being in the midst of a pandemic. So we've got a lot of challenges around public transit. I think when the governor instituted the stay-at-home order, the transit just fell precipitously. Nobody was riding the trains and buses. I think we're about at recovery. About 60% of the ridership is returned at PACE. About 50%. Don't hold me. I think those are close numbers, though. About 50% at the CTA, mostly because people on the south and west sides continue to ride the CTA, even though ridership has fallen elsewhere. CTA buses, CTA rail, and Metra have seen just precipitous drops and haven't seen the same kind of bounce back. So we've got some real challenges. We're going to have to figure out how to reimagine public transit over the next several years as we struggle with the pandemic.
Thank you. Yeah, and so Representative Evans, you mentioned Senator Rahm mentioned, and Angia mentioned this bill that you have in Springfield. Tell us about it. What is it that you're doing down there?
You're muted,
Senator. I've done it 100 times. Just looking to, first of all, listen to what our local elected officials and what the people are saying. And I always see policy changes for us as, we deliver the package once local communities are saying what they want. I think the president is saying that we have to integrate public transit. People don't see it as different systems, different leadership. They just see it as a way to get around. So we have to create legislation, and we have that in a couple of bills. We have a Senate bill. I know I have a House bill. I'm getting the exact number. And basically the bill is doing what the president is looking to do. How can we integrate these systems so that the user, the rider, the low-income person can get from A to B? They don't care if it's Metro, CTA, whatever. They just want to get where they want to go, and they want to do it in an expedited manner so they can get back to enjoy their family or whatever their recreations are, and they really enjoy life. So the bill, again, is the mechanism behind it, how we fund these programs, because it's tough. People aren't on public transit as much. So clearly public transit is losing. A lot of our public transit now is being subsidized by the federal government. It's going to be a tough go to get back to where we need to go, but we need to get there. And we're never going to have a good public transit system just dwelling in the problems. I'm glad with the leadership of President Preckwinkle, we're looking for solutions, and this opportunity to change the law to allow sharing of public dollars, to allow some subsidies temporarily to go to some of the agencies, and again also focusing on improving the system. And it's something that we got to be all in on. So I think moments like this can get people talking and thinking about the sacrifice needed and the focus needed to make our public transit what it should be, because it's not what it should be. And I think that's hopefully what we get out of these conversations is we're not living in an ideal public transit for Cook County. Our public transit system needs improvement, it needs infrastructure improvement, it needs work to be done to it, and it needs a better strategy, because the current strategy is not working. And it's not working for the least of us, the low-income folks, the single moms, and the public workers who need to get where they need to go. So that's kind of my focus in spring.
Okay, so Mayor Reinbold, we're talking about transit. We've talked about the long commutes, and that's because people have to go to their jobs or to work. But what about people being able to work close to where they live? And I know you have been an advocate for transit-oriented development, which is an opportunity to bring jobs to the community. So share with us, what you envision for transit-oriented development in Richton Park, and what do we need from other levels of government to make that happen for your community?
Well, what we've learned in our transit-oriented development project, I couch it as a journey. It's definitely been a journey. We're very fortunate in terms of cooperation from other governmental entities, that we've had a great deal of cooperation, literally at every level. When we've reached out to the county via President Preckwinkle and Commissioner Miller, we've received financial support, technical support, planning support for the project. At the federal level, we've received commitments of funding. MWRD is supporting our stormwater management. We've got a lot of work to do in terms of stormwater. At the state level, we've received brownfield cleanup dollars. So the good news is that we've got a lot of cooperation. Even at the local level, the Village of Richton Park has invested significantly in site acquisition, and we've scraped a lot of these sites. So we're ready for that. When we look at transit-oriented development, there's the advantage of quick and easy access. In our case, on the Metro to Chicago. So for our residents, for access to those jobs and the affordability when compared to other areas for housing is a huge plus for us. So for our residents, it's a positive thing. We're fortunate in Richton Park that through our planning process, where we've engaged our community, we've got virtually no pushback on the concept of a TOD. As you know, TODs require a relatively high density or higher density than many communities are used to, especially when you're a bedroom community. But we're fortunate that our residents understand the value of this and what it'll bring to our community. When we look at the availability of housing, and when we look at the need for affordable transit, we have to be mindful of the fact that the income level of our residents within our town center is a mixture. We have to ensure that we're developing policies in a framework where there is affordable housing within the community, because the transit-oriented developments that work well are those that have a mixture of housing because of those amenities. One thing we have to caution ourselves on with the transit-oriented development, and this is why it's important to have policies to help address those of our residents that are lower income. For all of the things that make a transit-oriented development attractive, that tends to drive the price of housing up. And it just highlights the need to ensure that we have a policy in place as we talk to our developers and our other elected officials in the region to make sure that we've got a component of affordable housing.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to do like a quick round, and I'm not sure if we're going to be able to get to the questions from our viewers, but I heard a lot of you talk about next steps and where do we go from here. And so can we do a quick round starting with President Preckwinkle of what do you see that we need to be doing next if we're going to have transit that deals with the equities and inequities that we have in our communities? One more time. There we go.
There we go. Well, first of all, we're implementing our fair transit initiative starting in the beginning of the new year. So that's a good beginning. But I am grateful that Romaine Brown, a Cook County resident, is now the chair of the Metro Board, and I hope to work closely with her and the Metro Board around this broader effort to try to re-envision public transit in the midst of this crisis. The pandemic won't last forever, although we're not nearly at the end of it. And we've got to be figuring out what we're going to do as a vaccine is available and better therapies exist. Now, one of the challenges for transit is that there may be a shift in the work environment. More people may be working at home. And what does that mean for public transit? And people have to feel safe on public transit, safe that they're not going to be unnecessarily exposing themselves to the virus. And unless they feel safe, they won't return to public transit anytime soon. So we've got challenges around equity. We've got challenges around safety and well-being of people who use public transit. And we have to have a broader conversation, as I said, about a universal fare card and brainstorm around what's going to happen in our economy related to whether or not people work at home or work in an office or work at an off-site location, and what that means for public transit. And I wish I could tell you what I think is going to happen, but I don't have any idea. But I think we got to start thinking about that. How is the pandemic going to transform our economy, and in particular, how it's going to transform utilization of public transit?
Senator Rahm?
Well, I think the next step is, from my perspective, as chair of transportation in the state Senate, is having a comprehensive approach to ensuring that every public transit agency in the state of Illinois has a transparent, data-driven, and equitable approach and process to the way they move forward on projects. We need to start using data. We need to start not just having it, but using data. We need to start being transparent and say, look, we're choosing this project over this project because of X, Y, Z, and making that publicly available. I think having and getting public input is going to be important too, right? It's about the people in these communities. It's not about me. It's not about Representative Evans. It's not about us. It's about making it easier for the people that, quite honestly, have got the wrong end of the stick for too long. And that's, I think, part of making sure that they make it transparent, and then having it equitable, right? I just, I go back to, this week and the time that we're in right now. I think transportation is a big part of that. Look, if you ask my colleague, Senator Robert Peters, he'll say criminal justice reform is the biggest part of the moment that we're in. I'm the chairman of transportation. So selfishly, I'll say I think transportation is a big part, because I truly believe that, because it's all connected: jobs, education, healthcare, safety, accessing being able to access a pharmacy. My colleagues in the Black Caucus have laid out an agenda, have talked about this, and I've tried to follow their lead. But to do all of those things, a number of things have to happen to be able to access all of those different issues. But you have to be able to get there, and that's, for me, what it boils back down to. And so I do believe that making sure that we have a transportation infrastructure system that takes that into account is the key. Is the key in many ways. And so I think we need to reform the way we look at funding transportation and infrastructure projects. And by the way, in my committee hearing on the 27th with the tollway, I asked our labor leaders, we think of equity not just in getting people to jobs. We think about the jobs itself that need to be done to create these improvements in transit. And what they've said essentially is, the more projects that are done in those communities, the more likelihood that the people from those communities will be hired. That's an important equity piece too, right? And so, and we need to hold them to it. We need to hold everybody to it. But I believe equity means not only making sure the hundreds and hundreds of thousands of folks can get to the jobs, school, healthcare that they need to get to, but also the jobs that are improving those transit areas or points, transit points, are filled by those in those communities. So I think that's an equity piece too. So I think those are the next steps. I look forward to working with everyone here and many more to getting them done.
Representative Evans, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, again, is we're here for racial equity, so we understand that there's a problem, and we understand that inequities exist. So we don't have to debate those, and focusing on transportation, I think is important because again, it's about unifying families. Getting families together, getting them where they need to go, getting them back to their homes so they can enjoy themselves. And I think COVID has really revealed that. And I'm so happy to be a part of this with the president because we're talking about solutions. We know the inequalities exist. What are the paths to solutions? And this is the path. Making a system of transportation. We know about the jobs, winning folks to jobs, but I just really want to harp on just the quality of life. Having a person just get to the lakefront. If you live in Calumet City and you want to enjoy maybe 31st Street Beach is your beach of preference. How can you get there in a day's time just to enjoy the lakefront, to enjoy the city, just addressing mental health. People just want to get out and enjoy the society and enjoy the world. And I think when you're rich, that's not an issue. You can pay for a $40 Uber to take you wherever you want to go. You can get in your nice vehicle. But when you're low income and you don't have much, just getting downtown, and this is well documented, just getting to another community is a chore, and it shouldn't be this way. If I want to enjoy the splendors of the lakefront, the splendors of the city, if I want to go to a restaurant in St. Charles, if I want to go to a restaurant in Oak Park, if I want to go, and I live in the south suburbs, it shouldn't be a 2-hour journey or a $60 Uber ride. It should be accessible to me. That's how you connect the county. That's how you, I think, address some of these racial issues, is having communities be more connected, and transportation can do that. And that's the holistic piece that I really care about. I think about, but of course, jobs, chairing the labor committee in Springfield, being a member of the transportation committee. We definitely want to see the influx for our economy. And I just think it'll help all communities because when the economy is flowing, especially when we're looking to bounce back from COVID, our restaurants are going to want people in them. Our stores are going to want people back going to them. And transit is a way to make that happen. So for our hotels, for our restaurants, as we bounce back from this COVID disaster and pandemic, I think transit is going to play a role, and having a robust transit system will make the difference.
Thank you, Representative Evans, because so often we think about transit and the trip to work, but you emphasize that transit is important for everything in terms of quality of life. So recreation and visiting and all of those things. So thank you for bringing that perspective, because I think is extremely important. Commissioner Miller, what are your thoughts about how do we move from here to where we'd like to be?
Thank you so much. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing the interconnectivity of what's going to happen between the different rails, the Metra and the PACE and CTA. And I also really appreciate Senator Cunningham's comments of knowing exactly how much it costs and how long it takes to get from his district to downtown Chicago. I think that as elected officials, it's good for us to put that in perspective as we talk to the public, and knowing what they're experiencing and how much that costs. Time is money as well. And as we look towards the future of what's going to happen, let's just take out here in the south suburbs. We're about to open 3 new Amazon distribution centers in 3 different locations in suburban Cook County, and thousands of jobs will be available. And the idea is to have people from the community be able to have those jobs. However, even for certain areas, although it might be a 15, 20-minute drive in a car to get to those locations, it might be an hour to hour and a half ride on public transportation, if it's even available. So I think that we need to, our long game is to really have the plans in place to expand public transportation across the board, not just for jobs, but for all the other things that were mentioned, as well as making sure this robust transit system is effective for everyone who's going to be competing for all of these jobs of the future. And our plans moving forward should really be connected to that, and how we can not only connect. I think it's really important to emphasize that connecting within suburban municipalities is just as important as connecting to the city of Chicago and beyond, where we see the majority of jobs at this point. And our goal is in time that will change as far as having more jobs where people live, work, and play all the
and
time.
Mayor Reinbold, what are your thoughts about where do we go next?
Well, I think first I want to state that I think we're all in agreement on what the challenge is. Finding that solution is our next challenge, and that relates to dollars. Where do we find the dollars to sustain the support that's going to be needed for this? Commissioner Miller brings up a very good point in our region with the fulfillment centers that are popping up. Having a system that gets those workers to those jobs is going to be critical to move those individuals there. In the event of, or with COVID, I think the opportunity that it presents is, number one, it helps us to focus on this need, and it gives us some time to address the funding issue for these solutions that are going to come out of this conversation and even outreach within our community and with our legislators. So I think there's genuine opportunity here. We know that ridership, the estimates are that it's going to be, and I think they're optimistic, that it'll take 3 years for ridership on Metro, PACE, and CTA to return to their pre-COVID levels. So we know that there's going to be a gap there. So I think our next step is to start contemplating bringing together the various entities out there in a coalition to advocate for funding for what we determine the various programs.
Thank you. Now, we do have about 15 minutes that I'd like to turn to some questions from our audience. And one of the things I think is extremely important for equity. Now, we've talked about racial equity and economic equity, but we haven't talked about equity for the disability community. And we have a question here from Allard Ballard, concerned about the accessibility to the modern Metro Electric on their stations, particularly as it relates to the South suburban communities. And so, who would like to answer that question first? We need to make sure that this disabled community, that we're treating them equitably. So what about these metro stations and having access to them? Any one of you can respond.
Well, I would ask that the questioner provide us with information to be in contact, and I'll ask my staff to put them in touch with Metro folks. None of us run the transit agency, so it's kind of a tough one for us to be responsive to. But we will follow up with that individual and try to connect them with Excellent. The appropriate staff at Metro.
And so we have another question here about working from home. What do you think, or what are you hearing from your constituents of those who are able to work at home? Is that something that they want to continually do, or do you think that your constituents are anxious to get back into their offices? Again, any one of you can answer that question.
Well, I think my observation is kind of funny. So people in my age cohort, the gray-haired folks, like being in the office. And our younger staff people are perfectly happy to be at home. maybe I'm wrong, but that's my observation. I miss having people in the office and interacting with folks and stuff. But some of our younger people like working in their pajamas. I don't know. Other people should comment on this.
All right, some of you non-gray-haired people.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't know if it's because I'm growing a little gray on the sides here. Marcus, Representative Evans definitely has some gray. I'm trying to hide it a little bit, but Representative Evans definitely has some gray. Look, I think the reality is there are there are certain jobs that you are able to do remotely, and there are going to be folks that want to continue to do that. Obviously, there are certain jobs that are being done remotely, but would be better, be more productive or more efficient if they're done in person. And then I think the last part is just the reality, which is, and we haven't brought this up today, but I can say, I could do my job from home, right? But the reality is, I have a 2-year-old. Everyone that has a kid or has kids, there's a mental health aspect to this as well, right? Making sure that people are able to do their job while not trying to take care of their kids and handle everything at home. I think there's something to be said about everyone's mental health, and quite honestly, it's taken a toll, over the last 6 months. So I do think that, I've been hearing those 3 different things from constituents, but I strongly believe that most folks, given the fact that they're experiencing the chaos, if you will, at home, they would be open to going back to working in person. And again, it's all a matter of personal preference. Maybe it's because I have gray hair, or maybe it's because President Preckwinkle and I are both people, right? We like to be around people and we like to interact and so forth. But I do think that's my guess, is that folks will want to go back to, most folks want to go back to in person.
Anyone else want to comment on that?
Yeah, I was just going to add, Jackie. So I spent the majority of my working professional career in a remote environment. So I've been used to this for the last 25 years, actually. But I will say it is a move of going in the future. Actually, just yesterday, Amazon had a huge virtual job fair where they said they're hiring 33,000 people across the country for virtual jobs. So these are not the jobs that are going to be in fulfillment centers. These are other jobs. So it's just going to be preference, and it's also productivity. Some people are able to get a lot done at home, but some people need the environment of being around others and communicating and having that type of environment to get things done. Or it might be a hybrid model. So I think the other thing is that it takes a toll being at home, like when you're a whole family at home and everybody's there all day long. The other day, my son told me I'm pretty noisy around here when I'm in the house. So I was like, wow, okay. So how do you manage that and be productive? I think that's the most important issue. But students are having a hard time being at home for such a long period of time. And that just might affect certain people's quality of life as far as their learning goes. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I do think that when we talk about the equity piece and transportation, we still need transportation for other issues as well, as Senator Evans pointed out.
Hey, can I mention, sure. Jack, and I think, that's why I really love what President Preckwinkle is doing with this racial equity conversations, because some people do well economically and they forget. They've never experienced low income life, or they're just totally disconnected from it. And I think this question is probably my favorite question, because, the workers at Jewel Osco, the workers at Target, they don't have a choice. And I think that's what President Preckwinkle was trying to get to, is low income people can't choose to work at home. The server at the restaurant can't make that decision. So as policymakers, we're impacting those individuals, and it's really about them. I'm not concerned about the $200,000 lawyer. They'll figure it out. But what is the person that's the maid at the hotel downtown? What are they going to do? And that's the people that we're focusing on. So in my community, southeast side of Chicago, is low income workers. And they're telling me that they're already at work, so they don't know what it's like to work from home. They're at work. So nothing's changed from them. The only thing that's changed from them is the dangers have increased, but their income hasn't increased. And they're worried every day about getting COVID. They're concerned, and I'm hearing that all the time. So they still want the trains to run on time so they can get to work. They still want a high quality transit system, and matter of fact, they want it to be even better. They want it to be cleaner. They want it to be more accessible. And I think that we got to keep that at the top of our minds. because again, many of us, we become successful or we're around successful people, and just we can't forget about the people that are struggling, because we're making policy for those folks. Again, the people with resources will figure it out. They always do. But we got to make good policies for the low income. I'm thinking about the single mom with no car who's living in Avalon Park or Calumet Heights or Jeffrey Manor. What are they going to do? And that's what this week is about.
Oh, thank you very much for that. Well, actually, you brought up something that Senator Rahm mentioned earlier, and that is what the transit agencies are doing about their vehicles. So what are you hearing from your constituents in terms of concern about getting on transit vehicles, both those essential workers as well as the choice workers? Are you getting feedback? Are you getting questions? Are you getting concerns about whether or not it's safe to ride on transit? Again, anyone can take that question. No one?
No, I think it's important to understand that all of our transit agencies are making a valiant effort to try to keep their buses or their train cars or whatever clean. One of the things I got in preparation for the panel today is a 10 reasons you can commute with confidence on Metro. Work they're doing, high power washers, steamers, and other disinfectants they're using, whatever. It's a 10-point list of what they're trying to do to meet safety concerns, well-being concerns of their riders. But I think to go back to Marcus Evans' point, we know that that CTA, PACE, and Metro are making a valiant effort to try to keep their cars, their buses, their rail cars or the buses sanitized. But what we have to understand is that we have a substantial number of people in the county who have to go to work regardless, right? And we should be focused on trying to be sure that they're protected and supported in whatever way we can. That's one part of it. The other thing, I have to say this as a teacher, one of the things that I find amusing about this, bitterly ironic, is that I think parents have come to appreciate the teachers of their children a little more than they might have. If they haven't had spent 6 months with them trying to help them with their homework, be sure that they're educated in the absence of in-person classrooms. So
exactly.
Can't help it. I'm a teacher.
So are any of the others of you getting some questions and concerns expressed by residents about the cleanliness and the safety of riding on transit? And what can we do about it? I mean, how can we spread that 10-point plan that President Preckwinkle talked about with Metro? And CTA has a similar kind of outreach to say that their vehicles are clean. But are any of the rest of you getting that kind of questions, concern about riding transit due to COVID?
I'd like to chime in. There is we do hear some concerns from residents, but I think more than the concerns, we're getting positive feedback, because the residents that either by choice or not are having to commute, they understand and appreciate, and they see actively the steps that are being taken in regards to Metro's sanitizing, making sure people that are riding, of course, because of the low ridership, they have the opportunity to socially distance. But I think those that are commuting generally are comfortable. There was initial hesitation, which is understandable, but I think they've become accustomed to it and they've developed the confidence level.
Terrific. So I want to go back to the disabled community one more time. There's a question about affordability. And Senator Rahm and Representative Evans, you're probably best able to answer this question. And that is about the fares for ADA, that they have to pay in some cases a lot more for transportation than the rest of us. It's kind of like what Senator Cunningham was talking about. There's a difference. I mean, it's inequitable in terms of where you live and the transit you have available. But for people who are disabled, they are facing the same kind of inequity as relates to the cost of transportation. Is there any thoughts in Springfield about providing additional subsidies, about easing that burden on disabled travelers?
Well, sure. No, I think there absolutely is. Look, there's last year there was 6,000 bills filed alone, and so I know for a fact there were a few that were filed around the affordability of fares for public transit. And I think, look, it's people with disabilities, veterans, low income folks. We're talking about a number of different people in our community that that the word equity should apply to in this context as well, right? I think equity and access means making sure we have better transit, on in the areas of that have been disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs, by disinvestment, and so forth. But I think it's not just enough to just set up the transit, right? We have to make sure people can afford it. And so I think there is some discussion on that. I think it's important for us to continue to hear from people on that. Look, I've worked with groups like Access Living, and that on issues to help people with disabilities. But again, it's important for us to hear from folks so that we understand that this is a concern of theirs. And so I look forward to very much having this be part of the conversation as it relates to equity in transportation.
Yeah, and I'm just happy. Yeah, I'm happy that the disabled community is speaking up. Again, President Preckwinkle is creating this moment focused specifically on racial equity, but people should be conversating and speaking up and letting us know. And that's very important for our disabled community. I think on the state level, the way I think about it is it's about investments. When our local leaders come to Springfield and say, Marcus or Rom, focus on X, Y, and Z, I just see transit, whether it's helping the disabled community or helping low-income African Americans and Latinos. What we're saying is when we do this, it will have a ripple effect in other spaces in our economy. Again, how can I support a restaurant? How can I support another place that will be an economic engine in this county if I can't get there? If I can have dollars, I want to expend these dollars in a place in Madison. I want to expend these dollars in Oak Park. I want to expend these dollars in Skokie, but I can't get there, and that's a problem. And I think that's what the president is saying. If we put the investment in transit, it'll have ripple effects throughout the economy, to the local restaurants, to the places that our disabled communities want to go to. If they want to be serviced in a particular space, how do you just get them there? And then we can really see the whole state improve. But you got to have that focus to invest in transit for the ripple effects. But it's educating folks, because then when we talk about expending dollars in transit, then people don't support it because they don't see that it's going to have a ripple effect in the economy overall. Even in communities where it may not specifically touch, they'll see an improvement. And that's a conversation that, again, needs these moments. And thank you, President Preckwinkle, for creating this moment so you can have those ripple effects and economic improvement.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I'd like to thank each of you for your participation in the roundtable. I don't know about you, but I've enjoyed it. I think I've heard your commitment to equity and to transit, like President Preckwinkle. We used to wait for the number 2 express bus together on the corner of Hyde Park Boulevard and Greenwood. I miss doing that too, President Preckwinkle. But I'd like to thank each of you for participating today. And President Preckwinkle, would you like to close us out with our last minute and a half we have left this morning?
Well, I want to thank all our panelists. I'm very grateful to you for your willingness to take time to share your insights into the importance of public transit in our local economy. I want to thank you, Jackie, for moderating this panel. You're right. I miss our conversations waiting for the number 2 bus. I'm grateful to all of you for your participation in Racial Equity Week. This is something that we started a year ago, and we will continue as long as I serve in this office. I think it's important that we have conversations across a variety of substantive areas about the impacts of the pandemic racism in this country and racial inequity. And we're trying to do that through our Racial Equity Week, through a variety of forums and platforms and activities. And I'm grateful to all of you for participating today. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Alex, are we good to go? Have we done our job this morning? And